It's weird to think, what was our world before we had paper and the mass production of it? Humans have been embracing graphics since prehistoric times. At the very beginning, we used visual elements to express ourselves and to tell stories. Whether it was a carving, a painting, or marks on clay or animal skin, there was a story to be told as we as a human race slowly developed our communication skills. In 4000 BC, clay tablets were the first thing that we used. Image reproduction was occurring by ways of seals in clay. This was the first reproduction of graphic images to occur. This indentation or stamp seals were a way to indent ownership, a first attempt at visual branding and trademarking. Next was pictograms, drawn by the Sumerians using clay tablets. After came ideograms. Pictograms and ideograms are quite similar, both still using clay tablets to convey communication within civilizations. The main difference is that pictograms convey pictures, while ideograms convey an idea using geometric shapes to represent it and are basically simplified pictures. Ideograms were often used by Egyptians, called hieroglyphics, as well as cave dwellers began to paint on cave walls. Next came binding. The origins of binding predates both paper and printing, and even the alphabet. This is because the Chinese logographic system needed binding. The logographic system was a type of writing style that the Chinese adopted, similar to the Egyptian hieroglyphics. Logographics are written characters that represent a word or a phrase. Sewing has always been a popular bookbinding technique. However, it was more expensive than hot glue binding. It wasn't until the 19th century that other forms of binding became popular or even possible. After binding, we finally get the Phoenician alphabet, derived from the North Semitic alphabet. The Phoenicians helped spread their alphabet by traveling as a merchant society, as they traded across the Mediterranean Sea. It contained 22 letters with only consonants represented. It is the ancestor of the Greek alphabet and all Western alphabets as well. Imprinting images onto clay had its obvious implications, and a development of a lighter and more versatile substrate was needed. That first new substrate was papyrus. The manufacturing of papyrus occurred in Egypt for the use of pictography. For centuries, this was the primary means of conveying pictographs and written words, but had to be created manually as there was no way of printing. Papyrus comes from a plant, sort of like a reed that grows near the Nile River. The stems would first be cut into strips, then pounded, laid crosswise into a single sheet, pressed together, and then dried. It would then be burnished with a stone to create a smooth surface, and a reed pen was used to write or draw. By 1000 BC, the Greeks as well as the Romans adopted the alphabet from the Phoenician letter forms. The Greek alphabet was developed far more efficiently and accurately compared to the Phoenician alphabet. It's the first time we see vowels being represented. Just like the Phoenicians, however, it was written right to left. The reason it's called alphabet is the first two letters in the Greek alphabet, alpha and beta. With the Romans right behind the Greeks, they quickly adopted the alphabet as well and started to create a thriving book industry, all handwritten. In 100 AD, the Romans also helped with the revolution of the alphabet by adding the concept of lowercase and uppercase letters, as well as punctuation. Next came paper. Papyrus was also not the ideal substrate for writing and would not be helpful in printing. The revolution came from Ceylon when he discovered how to make paper. Paper was made out of a mixture including mulberry bark, hemp, linen rags, and water. The mixture was spread on a screen or matter, the water pressed out, and the resulting sheets would then be dried from the sun. This process did not get changed for almost 19 centuries, and even though we have revolutionized the manufacturing component of paper and printing, Ceylon's pulping process for making paper is still used today. This is when the manufacturing industry begins, roughly 1456 with Johannes Gutenberg. It is important to keep in mind that he did not invent printing, or even the printing press. His famous breakthrough was the process of cast metal movable type, which was a method that the Chinese had actually already adopted. At first they used lead, which we now know is toxic, so we use wood instead. For the first time in history, Gutenberg made the possibility of mass production of print happen. He didn't invent printing, he commercialized it. He also started the art of typography, as he designed typefaces to stimulate the hand-lettered text of his time. Over time, typography develops, and you get thick and thin strokes, serifs, and typefonts. For roughly 400 years, Gutenberg's method was unchanged, as printing moved from a craft to an industrial process. By the time we get to 1500 AD, just 50 years after Gutenberg's invention, there are over 500 different types of books and 10 million copies in total. Some of the first books were about brewing beer, since at the time, beer was actually cleaner than their water systems, as well as the Gutenberg 42-line Bible, which 49 only exists today. It's important to note that despite advancements in type and design, pictorial work still needed to be hand-drawn and designed. The term lithography means stone printing and comes from the use of a limestone slab being engraved with images for printing. Images would be drawn, engraved, or transferred through a chemical process that separated the image and non-image areas, based off the principle that oil and water do not mix, still a very important concept in printing today. This offset lithography style allows for smoother tones of pictures, simplified reproduction of pictures, and improved tonal gradations. Lithography still dominates the printing industry today, as printing presses use printing plates made out of either aluminum or other metals. In 1797, a paper mill clerk named Louis Robert designed a machine engineered by Brian Donkin. It's called the Fourdrinier because of the two guys, Henry and Celie Fourdrinier, that manufactured it. This machine is still used today, can be several hundred yards long, and can make 3,000 feet of paper a minute. Now we enter the 20th century, the electronic era. With the rise of computers, innovative circuits, and microprocessors, we have highly improved the printing industry. Since the 1980s, every piece of printing equipment has been driven by a microprocessor, and as printing becomes cheaper, it has become more accessible. High-speed and quality printing becomes easier and easier with the invention of xerography, toner, inkjet printing, ink quality, desktop publishing, improved computers and graphics, as well as so many other inventions. And although the electronic area is consumed with screens, paper is still really important. Printing paper is now more accessible and more mass-produced than it ever has been. Now, there are 36 different industry segments related to printing as well as allied industries that support it, including publishing, mailing, signage, software, marketing, communications, and packaging. So, despite the rise of computers and the digital era, paper is here to stay.